Well, now this morning I wanted first to talk about the way we would give a lesson to a child of this age, 2.5 to 5, because the child at this age is quite different to the older child, and the child from this age doesn't really learn through the medium of language. As they get older, they're able to follow more easily what we say, but when they're really little, 2, 2.5, 3, they have to concentrate very hard in order to understand what we're saying. And with most of the equipment, they have to understand something through the equipment, through using the equipment, building up to an understanding. You don't expect them to understand the first day. And so it's something that this sense training is something, size, color, and so on, something that children can't understand from an explanation, something you can't explain to them. It's only from using the material that they build up this understanding. So it's no good talking. In fact, the less we talk, the better. And many lessons we can give without talking at all. I think we are apt to think that once a child has achieved a full sentence, that they understand everything. But you see, by 2.5, a child from a home where they have heard English or their mother tongue well spoken, they are speaking with complete sentences. The syntax is correct, the accent is good. So it's absolutely fantastic they've done it in that time. But all children of that age have just around 450 words. And in English, which is a language of over 500,000 words, then 450 words is actually very few. So you can see that when we just talk fluently, it is, as we should do, except when we're teaching, then it is too much for them to understand through language. Also, they're only just beginning to talk themselves, fluently. They're needing a lot of practice with language. If you notice your little ones of 2.5, they chatter a great deal. When they're lying in bed by themselves, they chatter aloud to themselves. It's very charming. You have two of them sitting at a table together. It always charms me the way they both chatter at once. And by about 3+, there's a big change. One is speaking and the other is listening. A conversation is going on. But certainly I have a good deal of work to do on this acquisition of language. Well, now that you have your material that you're going to present, and you've decided that a certain child is ready for this material, and the child is not doing anything else, so you choose your moment when this child is free to get ready to give the lesson. And before you ever open the school, you make quite sure that the material is in perfect order, it's complete, it's clean, it's kept perfectly, it's attractive. If things are not really attractive, the child doesn't feel like working with them. So it has to be in this really good, immaculate condition. All the material serves one purpose, you see. And we try, you'll see as we look at materials, that each piece isolates the thing you're going to teach. So now the material is there, it's self-manipulative. That is, the child will learn through handling the material. Little children learn a great deal through touch. They learn through everything comes into the mind at first through the senses. You see? And the sense of touch is the predominant one at first. And we all know how every time a small child sees anything, even before he can talk, he puts out his hands for it. And he can't know it without holding it and touching it. And it's very serious when we refuse to let him hold things. We say, no, don't touch all the time, because then he can't learn. I was rereading Sagan, who was one of the people that inspired Dr. Montessori, And he, interestingly enough, speaks of all the senses as being different facets of the sense of touch. He says how you don't taste until the food is on your tongue. You don't hear until the sound waves have struck your eardrum. And you don't see until the light has gone through and touched the retina. So, in a way, he says all the senses are facets of the sense of touch. But certainly the hands play the greatest part in learning. And it is essential that we use our hands and learn to use them well. And again, Montessori throughout is very insistent that the hands and movement generally develops the mind. And the mind doesn't develop unless the hands also are active. And in fact, the history of mankind, the hands have always led the brain. Men must have played about with a lump of clay, sat there doodling with it for ages before somebody made the first pot. You see? And once they had made a pot, and then probably it was sun-dried at first and then later baked, then very quickly their ingenuity enabled them to make better and better pots. See? And with those first weapons, they must have sat and sort of knocked stones together and played about with stones, I imagine, for almost hundreds of years before they suddenly realized they could shape those wonderful arrowheads and spearheads. See? So always it was the work of the hands that led the mind, and once the thing was made, then the mind was able to develop and go very much further. And that's how it is with the children. So everything we give them has to be self-manipulative, and they have to learn by using it and using their hands. As far as possible, also, we make the material self-corrective, so that they cannot work if they're constantly interrupted by a teacher going down to point out mistakes. Every time you interrupt a child who's working, you break their concentration. And every time you break their concentration, they are less well able to concentrate another time. If a child is lying there peacefully in his cot looking round at the world, this baby, you leave him alone. You see, he's concentrating, he's trying to memorize his environment, he's staring at things, learning. And if you interrupt him, you break that very important stage. If it's broken too often, you get the child who is unable to concentrate, sort of butterfly child who doesn't learn. But the time when you pick him up is when he cries, because then he is telling you he needs attention. You see, usually he cries once or twice in a day, usually at rather regular intervals, because he has this great need to be petted and to be talked to. And if the mother doesn't pick the baby up and pet it and talk to it and sing to it, it will not learn language, and it will not develop the true human emotions. It will grow up a cold person. In fact, we do know that these children who are neglected in that way, I'm always saying it because it's a very serious modern trait. Mothers have been taught to do this by ignorant doctors and psychologists, to leave their babies alone when they cry, and then they will stop crying. Certainly they'll learn not to cry. But do you want them to learn not to cry at the expense of learning language and at the expense of developing their human emotions? You see, they learn not to at a terrible expense. And also, if they're not played with and petted in this way, then at 6 months of age, they may be mentally defective. And you can, these children who are mentally defective through neglect, in this way, then they need this one-to-one caring of the mother-child relationship, and then they can be brought back to nearly normal by a year. But if they're continuing this neglect, it's a very serious state indeed. And of course, many of them will just die of neglect. So we do have to rethink the importance of the mother in the care of the child, and that she cannot put her baby in a daycare when it's born. She mustn't have children unless she's going to give them this real care. Well, now, the material then, and the next thing is that the child cannot learn in disorder. I imagine none of us can, really. That the more orderly our environment, with the fewer possessions we have, the more we are able to concentrate and study. So always in giving a lesson, the teacher has to be very orderly in her approach. She would have a table. She's going to give the material on the table with nothing else on it. If it's a lesson that's a rather large material that's going to be given on the floor, then she will lay a mat on the floor, like a work area, and there'll be nothing else on that mat. If there are other things strewn about, the child's attention is distracted, you see, and he doesn't concentrate on one thing that you're giving. So that is important, this order. And so it's going to be orderly, the table's or the floor mat's going to be clear, nothing else there, and the teacher is going to limit her words. Use as few words as possible, and in many cases she won't need to talk at all. I think when you're at the table, it's the best way is to sit next to the child, because you get this relationship, easy relationship. It's easier to work next to him than it is from the other side of the table, and you both have the thing the right way up. So nearly always you sit next to the child. Can't see it matters which side you sit myself, but it's up to you. So you invite the child to sit next to you, and then you place the material in front of the child, so in such a way that the child gets a very good view of what is happening. See, he gets a good view of what's happening, and he can also take over at any point. Once he understands how the material is used, if you've interested him, then you find him taking over. And occasionally, when you put it there, he begins using it even without a lesson. He may have seen you give another lesson, or he may see from the material what ought to happen. And so you don't even always have to start. So you arrange it and you work it so that what you do is very clear to the child. Now I've said that the hands are so important. See? And the children's hands need help to be trained until the hand is really able to do anything the will demands. And we need to use our hands for very small and delicate work. If you think as adults what a wonderful work an eye surgeon does. We had on the television a series of operations given, and one was an eye operation, threading an almost invisible needle, and the thread almost invisible. See, in this fine, tiny grafting. Absolutely fantastic. You have to have wonderful hands. See, well, many people might like to go into that field of work, but it would entirely depend on their hands as to whether they could do so or not. Our hands play a large part in our work through life. See, we may want to do beautiful needlework. See, well, you've got to have well-developed hands, or you can't produce anything worth producing. So with the children, we're very aware of this necessity to help them to good hand movements, with perfect control of the hands. For that reason, and also for the reason that the hand does develop the mind. So that means that the teacher has to use the material with these meticulous hand movements. And you will find that with the simplest piece of the Montessori material, you do need to sit down and use it so that you perfect your own movements. And unless the teacher moves well around the classroom, the children will not move well or handle well, because they're imitative at this age. They imitate the grown-up, and whatever the grown-up does, the children imitate. Nature is saying to them, you have to become mature, you have to become an adult and therefore you do everything that the adult does in order to learn. That is where mankind is different to the animals. The animals are born with a set pattern of behavior. Man is born without a set pattern. He takes the pattern from the adults with whom he comes in contact. That's why we have such different racial habits and behavior. So the teacher has to get these good hand movements, and in using the material you always know when you've made a bad movement, because the result is noise. See, roughness produces noise. If you're moving around the room, you knock into a table or a chair, you get an ugly noise. So you have to be aware of this when you're in the classroom. Now, you cannot be cold in your relationship with children. See, I think this is one fault I do find in many Montessori schools, that there is a over-quiet room perhaps sometimes, and an over-cold approach. Little children, you have to treat them as warmly as possible. They should be very happy and loving. They should laugh, they should enjoy life. See, you should enjoy life with them. See, they just have to have a warm-hearted teacher. Unless they do, they atrophy. So before you ever start this lesson, you do have to have this relationship with your children. You see, so that they enjoy learning from you. They like you. You're happy together. And when you're going to give a lesson and you've got this bare table and everything in order and so on, you first have to smile at your child. Often it's enough to smile at them, you know, or you can say something to attract them. See? But you have to have this good relationship, and the child has to be feeling that he wants to learn whatever you're going to teach him. So I would like to see the Montessori teacher developing into this warmer person, someone who can have jokes with the children, who can laugh with the children, you see, and that there is this life in the classroom. So you make this good relationship, and then once you've got this relationship between you, then you can start to use the material. And when you start to use the material, it's then that you can start talking. For most material, some does require a few words, but always a minimum of words. You give this exact demonstration, and at some point you usually find the child taking over. You may find you can do the whole exercise, and if the child just sits and watches you, you do the whole exercise. You can either begin the exercise again, or you can invite the child to try. But with most things, I find that I'm halfway through or just started, and the child takes over. He sees what is meant, and he starts. Now, naturally, if he's got a new exercise to do, he's going to be very imperfect. He has to learn through practice. He has to learn through working with a piece of equipment many, many times. So he's going to make many mistakes. And you cannot teach anyone to see color. You cannot teach them to see size. It's only through practice that they're able to make judgments. And so as long as a child is working with a piece of equipment and using it for the correct purpose, you leave him alone. You never go down and point out errors. See? But if you feel that in any way you could help him improve, then the next day, before he gets it out, you would go and give him a new lesson. Perhaps he's handling it noisily. Perhaps he's holding it incorrectly. So you could give a new lesson stressing one of those points, but you wouldn't go down when he was concentrating and interrupt him. Because, as I say, this concentration has to be respected. You must never break it. Now there's always a place for the material, and each piece of material is kept in the same place once it comes into the classroom. And when the child has finished using a piece of equipment, he is encouraged to put it away in the right place. If he's been in the classroom a few weeks, he's probably used to seeing it wherever it's kept. He probably knows where it goes. If you think he doesn't know, then you take him and you show him the place, and you ask him always to put it back there. And once you have shown him a piece of material, he is free to help himself to it whenever he likes. He just goes and takes it and uses it for as long as he likes and puts it away again. I say we encourage them to put it away. We don't force it. You see, if a child gets up and leaves his work on the table, then you can say to him, would you like to put it away? Or should I help you put it away? Do you remember where it goes? See, anything. If you say, please put it away, and he says, no, I won't, well, you say, all right, I'll put it away for you today, and perhaps you'll put it away tomorrow. You see? So that you don't get your will up against his will in these unimportant ways. I mean, there are a few times when we have to say no and be definite, but we have many times when we don't need to. So we lead them to order. We don't try to start forcing them. Well, with a few children, if they have come from very untidy homes, the child's natural love of order has really been destroyed. And it takes them a long time to understand order. And I remember especially having one little boy, it must have taken him about 3 months before he put his own things away. I put them away for him, the other children put them away for him, and at last one day he put his own things away. And it was so rare for him to do anything like this that the other children said, oh, that was good, Charles, you put it away. And they came to me and they said, Charles put it away. And he never looked back. From that time onwards, he always very proudly was one of the best at clearing up. But I don't think he'd really understood before that minute. So it's better to, go patiently with these small children. And we can't be dictators in the classroom. So that's why I don't like it when I hear people say there's a rule in the Montessori classroom that everyone has to put their work away. There isn't any rule like that. It's nice to, and we encourage it, and the teacher can help people, and other children can help do it. And we are a society, and everyone helps each other. And eventually everyone does. Well, the room is full of these pieces of equipment, you see, with which the child can teach himself, but which the teacher has to put him in touch with so that he understands how to use each piece. And we do say to the children not to take anything until they have been given a lesson with it. You see. And if they want something very badly and you haven't given them a lesson, well, they can ask for the lesson and you can always show them. Sometimes there's a piece of equipment that they're not ready for, but if they're very insistent and they want it, it's better to give them an exact lesson. And sometimes you'll find that they are ready for it and you haven't expected them to be as advanced as they are. And sometimes they're satisfied at being able to look at it and handle it, and they're ready to leave it alone until they are ready for it. See, but you don't have to refuse them. Now, when you give them this material, again, we always give it in a truthful and an honest fashion. In the past, it has been the habit to teach children through fantasy and to make up sort of fairy stories about things. And this is impossibly difficult for them. You see, they have entirely fresh minds. They know very, very little about the world. They're trying to understand their environment. They're trying to learn the conventions of their group. and to gain knowledge. And if we wrap everything up in fantasy, then they can't understand anything and they become really confused and querulous and unhappy. See? When they're much older, when they know what is real and what is fact, then they can have stories that are not necessarily true because they know the difference between what is real and what isn't. But up to this 5, 6, we have to teach them truthfully and honestly and not mix up fantasy, because that makes learning impossible. If you went to an entirely new planet and you were trying to learn about things that you had never seen or heard about, and always you were told a kind of myth, you would get absolutely frustrated beyond everything, wouldn't you? And it's like that for the children. So we don't go into this fantasy with them in any way. And again, we don't blame them if they make mistakes, and we don't praise them if they do it the right way, and we never compare them with other children. Some people find this way of not getting praise difficult to take, but I think really it's almost treating you as an inferior person if you're told you're good all the time. I wouldn't like it myself. If the child has done a piece of work and has enjoyed doing what he has done, he isn't good for having done it. See? And once you start meting out praise and blame, the child no longer works for the pleasure of working. He does the absolute minimum to get a star or to get praise. See? And this is a very serious thing that happens. So we treat him as we would any other dignified worker. See? It's giving him a dignified status when we expect him to work for the pleasure of work and not just because he wants this idle praise. But we can take an interest. Doesn't mean we don't take an interest in what they do. You can say, wasn't that lovely work? See? Or haven't we all worked hard this morning? You know? And we do call it work because it is work. In fact, the child is concentrating very hard indeed. Although he enjoys doing it, you see, he is really a worker. And we must realize that the child at this age works very hard. He's never going to work as hard again in any time of life. Dr. Montessori again was always pointing out that between birth and 5 years of age, the child actually works harder and achieves more and achieves things to a higher standard than he ever does in any 5 years afterwards. And if you really begin to think before next lesson of what the child actually does from birth when he doesn't know anything at all, his mind is just a blank slate, and 6 when he can do so much, you will be really amazed at what he achieves. See? But he doesn't achieve it just by picking it up from the atmosphere. He only achieves it through very hard work. And that baby who cries to be talked to, and you pick him up and you talk to him and sing to him and pet him, he stares at you and he concentrates with terrific force for about 20 minutes or so. So working very hard to listen, to catch these wonderful sounds. He doesn't know that they mean anything, but he has to work very hard, and then at some point he begins to vaguely understand that these sounds have meaning. And by a year, he's using his first 1 or 2 words with intent. See? And then by 2.5, as I've said, he has full sentences. So he has had to work terrifically hard to do that. See? So we have to appreciate the children and see them as workers. We have the feeling that they only play because their work is so different to ours. But they do work. And so when they do these things, we do talk about it as work rather than as play. And that again, you see, we give them the idea that that work is pleasurable. Work is something that we all enjoy. as we do if we're fortunate. Every day. I think those are the main points about how we give a lesson. Now, are there any questions you would like to ask about it?
You mentioned at the very beginning that you wait until the child is ready. How do you perceive that?
You have to. Nobody can teach you how to perceive it. You get a feeling for your children. You see, I should talk later on how we get a class started. And then, as a teacher, you do build up this extra sense so that you get a feeling of the right moment with each child. I mean, approximately the age is the same. At 2.5, they all would like this sort of material. At 3.5, they should be ready for this thing. You see, so there are certain guidelines, but you do have to learn when to judge. You have to get the feeling of your children. You don't treat any two quite the same, you know, because no two children are the same. And it's marvelous when, as you begin to build, as a young teacher, when you begin to build up this feeling and you get this rapport with the children, so that you do, like a good mother, you know just what's right at the right moment. It's a skill you have to learn. And of course, you make mistakes. But if you see, I have given this beautiful lesson to a child, and he is totally uninterested, well, then I must be very careful. I don't want to destroy this relationship. I don't want him not to like the material. So I give him a big smile. And I don't want him to feel that I'm annoyed because I've taken all this trouble and it hasn't worked. You see? So I give him a big smile and I say, wasn't that nice? You see, now I'm going to put it away. I'll show you where it goes. I'm going to put it away and I'll do it with you again tomorrow. You see? And probably, tomorrow he's just waiting for